journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hello and welcome to Ask the Instructor. My name is John Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We started this show to help out our students, both enrolled in our classroom and online courses, to really go above and beyond and get a step deeper for some information. So check that out on the website, www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Now, the first question that we have today, now this is actually a question that I do get fairly often. Quite a few students have asked me this, but most recently, one of our students, his name was Jeff. And Jeff lives out in Ocala. He's actually on our online course, and he called in with this question. If you guys do want to submit your questions to be answered here live on the show, just go ahead and email us in. The email is info, I-N-F-O, @tampa-school.com. Again, that's info@tampa-school.com. Send in your questions. Our only stipulation is that you're enrolled in a course with us. Now, you don't have to be enrolled in a course to watch this show, but if you do want to ask a question, you got to make sure you're enrolled in a course with us. So, Jeff's question was about a net listing agreement. Now, net listing agreements are a very common type of question, not only in the course and on your exam, but also in the real world as well. This is a very common situation that comes up where a seller basically says, hey, I want to walk away from the deal with this much money. And you have to know how to figure that out. You can't I mean, yes, you could kind of guess at that, but we're going to really kind of show you how to pinpoint that dollar amount that you need to sell the price for. So your seller is going to be able to walk away happy with their amount of money that they were looking to get out of the transaction. Your buyers will pay still a fair price for the property. You're still going to get paid with your commission. And we're also going to cover our closing costs, because if any of these little aspects are going to be missed, then your seller is going to be losing out on money. And guess who's not going to be happy with you if your seller is losing out on money? So this is, like I said, a very real-world topic that is taught in the course. I mean, so many times you'll hear from people, oh, the stuff you learn in the pre-licensing course is all just laws. This is stuff you're never going to use in the real world. And that's not quite true. There's so much information in this course that comes up on an everyday basis. Some of it where you actually do have to actively use it, and this is a really good example for that. So let's go ahead and make a little scenario here. Let's say that our seller wants to walk away with, let's say, $500,000. And now this term is called the net. So this is our seller's net. This is how much the seller wants to walk away from. The term net, you see that come up quite a bit, not just in the real estate course, but in several aspects of accounting numbers. You'll see it here where we say the seller's net. You could see it with net income. You could see it with a net lease. There's lots of terms that factor in this term net. So what does net mean? Net means not expenses. So if we kind of break that down here, net and not. You see how they're very similar. We just changed the E to an O. And what is it not? It's not our expenses. Now, so much of kind of understanding these concepts are just really understanding the smaller elements of it. So understanding that net, this is what the seller wants after expenses. Now everything gets a little bit clearer. That's our goal, especially when you're taking the exam and you have these questions that are just so many different layers of information that they're giving you, where they really just top one thing on top of another. You really have to just kind of dig through this stuff, and understanding what these terms mean is really your best way to kind of get started with this. So understand that net means not expenses. So our seller wants to walk away with $500,000 in this case. Now, we also need to factor in some closing cost. Now, I'm just going to use a rough estimate here, and if you are doing this on an actual listing appointment, trying to figure this information out, you do want to use one of the calculators that are available online where you could calculate out your closing cost. But let's just say it's going to be, let's say, $15,000 in closing cost. So we have $15,000 in closing costs that we need to account for. So far we have the seller's net, how much they want to walk away with after expenses. When everything is all said and done, they have $15,000 in closing cost. But let's add another variable to this. Let's say that they also have a mortgage that it has an outstanding balance. You ask them what the loan balance is, and they say, well, on my current mortgage, I owe $150,000. And then you compliment them, oh, great job paying down your mortgage, because that is quite a feat. But $150,000 is going to be our loan balance in this case. Now, unless you're doing some form of assumption, so unless you're assuming some sort of loan or something like that's going on, which is very uncommon, you don't really see that too often. So unless assumption is occurring, then this loan has to be paid off. If you remember, that's called our due on sale clause. So when we have a due on sale clause, that means that this $150,000 mortgage, this $150,000 loan, this has to be paid off before we're able to legally sell the property. Now, it doesn't mean that the seller has to wait 30 years and pay off their mortgage before they can finally sell their property. It just means at the time of closing, part of the money has to go towards this. This has to be paid, this has to be paid. And then there's one key thing that we're forgetting, which most real estate agents probably won't forget, and that's the commission. So let's say that you and the seller agreed on a 7% commission. So that's really the key information that we need here to really figure out pretty much everything. And a key thing to remember, in case you ever see this on an exam question or something like that, your closing cost typically doesn't factor in the commission. The closing cost, especially if you're using one of these calculators available online in the real world to try to figure out some closing cost, it may have an option for commissions in there, but let's say using this example that the commission is not included in that $15,000, because if out of that $15,000 we had to pay for all the closing cost and our commission, it wouldn't be a very good payday for us. So let's factor this out with a 7% commission here. So now, the question is, what do we have to sell this property for? What is going to be our break-even point so the seller is able to walk away with their $500,000 net? Now, another fun fact about this $500,000 price, you might remember about the protection from capital gains. So if this was, and this is another good piece of information to tell your clients when you're meeting with them, because these are questions they're going to have. Now, you still want to advise them to talk to an accountant for any more detailed tax purposes. You make sure you release yourself from liability about taxes and whatnot. I'm not an accountant. Talk to your accountant for this stuff. But the IRS code states that you can be protected for up to $500,000 of profit after all of your expenses. So for this case where the seller did walk away with a $500,000 net on their property, that would be called a capital gain. And if this were investment property or something that was not their principal residence, their main home where they live at, they'd have to pay capital gains taxes on that. So that would really even eat into their profit. That'd be another piece of math we'd have to calculate in here. But now let's say that this is their principal residence. If this is your principal residence, the IRS code says if you're filing your taxes married jointly, so that's the key here, you have to be married and filing your taxes jointly, you get a $500,000 exclusion from capital gains. The only caveat is that, number one, is that this is your personal residence where you live, and number two, that you've lived there for at least 2 years. So that's the key stipulation. And again, for any of this stuff, before you attempt this in your real world, do not try this at home. Talk to an accountant, get a professional advisor for this, but definitely know that this is something in the IRS code that you could advertise to your clients. Definitely do that, because that's something big to them when you tell them, hey, look, talk to your accountant about this, but the IRS code says this $500,000, if you file your taxes jointly, that's going to be excluded. So you're not going to have to pay any capital gains taxes on that. And then even if this was an investment property, there's all kinds of things like a 1031 exchange and whatnot that you could do to take this money and then reinvest it in something else. And then it still be excluded from the capital gains. But again, the tax code is very complex. The tax code is actually over 70,000 pages, believe it or not. No, they're not using big font. That's a little tiny fine print font and over 70,000 pages. So make sure you have a well-informed tax advisor to kind of help guide you through these. But let's get back to our question here. So we already gave them the good news, our seller, that they would be excluded from capital gains. And the other side of this too, if they were a single, say they're only filing their taxes as single, they're not filing jointly, then they could actually deduct or exclude $250,000. So half of this, they couldn't make quite this much money, because this is quite a bit of money to be making on the sale of your property. Maybe they're trading it up, and now you could get two commissions. You go sell their house and help them buy another one where they reinvest this $500,000 or something like that. But now let's answer the question of what we need to sell this for, because we're getting ahead of ourselves here. It's great to know all this information, but ultimately we have to sell the property. In order to sell the property, especially when they want this certain amount to walk away with, we need to know what it is that we're going to sell the property for, what our break-even price is. So in order to figure that out, now I'm going to go ahead and erase the 7% commission here. So just remember that we're dealing with a 7% commission. I'm sure you won't forget about that. That's the thing that real estate agents seem most attracted to, is the commission, for some odd reason. So I'll just write that in up here too, so we don't lose track of that. So we have our 7% commission. I know it's small and you probably can't read that, but that's just there so we don't forget about it. So what we need to do now is figure out what we need to sell the price for. And before we even factor in our commission, we know that we need our $500,000 in net, we need our $15,000 in closing cost, and we still have to pay off a $150,000 loan balance on the property. So we have these three things that we have to hit before we even factor in our commission. Now, the way I see most people start these problems, as far as going through and trying to solve something like this, is that they're inclined to add all these together, which, yes, that is going to be our correct first step. So let's go ahead and do that quickly, and then I'll get into how typically people end up going wrong with something like this. So we'll add this up. We have $500,000. Now you'll see I'm using my calculator here. And yeah, I could add this together in my head, but I don't want to make a fool of myself, and you don't want to make a fool of yourself on the exam, so always use your calculator, no matter how easy the math is. Don't let your ego get ahead of you where you think you know fractions and multiplication tables like there's tomorrow. Just use your calculator. Your calculator will never be wrong unless you punch something in wrong. So $500,000 plus $15,000 plus $150,000, and that's $665,000. Now, I say always use your calculator for these calculations, but like I said, you could enter in some information in your calculator wrong. It's real easy to punch in information like that in your calculator wrong, maybe hit a plus instead of a minus. So just think to yourself and make sure that that makes sense in your head. $500,000 plus $15,000 plus $150,000, $665,000, definitely seems like we're in the right ballpark. We could trust our calculator on this one. So now the $665,000, this represents our net, our closing cost, and our loan balance. So most people are able to get through this first step. Okay, we have to add these together, and this is how much we need to sell at least if we weren't even going to charge any commission, but we still need to charge a commission. Now, where most people go wrong with this type of question is that they're taking the $665,000 and they're just multiplying the 7% by this. So let's do that. I want to do that just to illustrate this point and see how we're going to end up different and see how we're going to actually end up making our seller with their little net. We're going to make them unhappy up here. They're not going to be happy with us because we're actually going to end up shorting them doing this method. So let's go ahead and calculate it out this way. Then we'll go ahead and do it the correct way because it does take a little bit of a change in perspective when we're looking at it. But once you understand it, it should be pretty easy. So this is what we need before commission. So everything before commission. So that's everything we need to calculate before commissions. So now what we need to do in order to do this the incorrect way, which like I said are the way most people are inclined to do this, is just multiply this by 7% commission. And it seems like it's going to make sense. And you're going to be really close with this number, but you're not going to hit it right on the head. So we'll do the correct way right after this. But let's go ahead and do now $665,000 times 7% commission, which is going to be 0.07 when we convert that to a decimal, and we end up getting $46,550. And we'll put commission question mark because we're not sure on that's being correct. I'm going to tell you it's not correct right here. We'll go back and redo this the correct way. But now let's go ahead and check this math because with math problems, you should always double check what you're doing. The way this works out, everything is very easy. So let's go ahead and add our $46,550 back into our $665,000. and we should get $711,550. So if we sold the property for $711,550, let's go back now and subtract out everything. And now this, you're going to see right away why this isn't the correct way to do that. Because now, first thing we need to calculate off of this $711,550 is our commission times 0.07. So we'll go ahead and calculate our commission off of this. And whoa, wait a minute. We just ended up with an extra $3,000 worth of commission somehow. So let's see, $49,808.50. Whoa, what an increase from $46,550. About an extra $3,000 of extra commission that just seemed to pop up. How do you going to explain that to your seller when your seller says, hey, wait a minute, I was supposed to get $500,000. Now you're telling me I'm only going to get $497,000? What about all that fancy math you did or that you didn't do probably or you didn't do correctly? And even though it's just $3,000, it's the principle more than anything. That's a really good way to leave a sour taste in your seller's mouth, especially if they had plans on what they're going to do with that money. And this could be even more significant of a difference too, depending on this. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you do these calculations correctly, because if you do these calculations correctly, not only in the course and on the exam, but then when you get out into the real world and the seller says, hey, I want a $500,000 net on my property, figure out what I need to sell it for. $711,550 is not enough. So let's go ahead and redo these calculations. Let's do this the correct way. So we're going to erase all that because that was just to show that point that we would have basically stole $3,000 when we promised them we're going to have a $500,000 net. So what we need to do now, we need to make our seller happy, turn that frown upside down, because now they're actually going to walk away with that $500,000 that we promised them. So the correct way to do this, now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this here a little bit to give us a little bit more room. So $665,000, remember that number. Feel like a magician, remember your card. So let's just give us a little bit more room here to solve this. So we have $665,000. Now I'm going to make 3 columns on here. Now the way I do the math, it's very purposeful. If you've seen me use the property taxes and property tax exemption savings math before and whatnot, you know how I'm very particular about how I like to lay out the math, and that's because it makes it easy. When you have a very finite set of steps and you do it in a very particular manner, it's very easy to remember. So that's why I do recommend laying this out exactly like I do in case you have some sort of question like this or if this does come up in the real world. So what we do is take our $665,000. Now this is going to represent our net, our closing costs, and our loan balance again. So again, everything but commission. So we'll give this 3 columns here. Now what we need to think about here is this is going to be our everything that we just talked about. Our next one we have to include in here is our commission. So we'll go ahead and keep track of everything over here, commission. And we'll just put everything else, since we're dealing with 3 different factors here. And that everything else does include our seller's net, which ultimately is most important because this is going to get paid no matter what. This is going to get paid no matter what. And maybe they'll ask you to decrease your commission so you don't get the full 7% that you negotiated to if you end up shorting them money like that. But we don't want to do that. Let's just do the math correct so we can get our full commission that we negotiated with the seller. So our commission rate is 7%. So we agreed to a 7% commission. You're like, okay, John, you're not telling me anything new. But now, again, this is the way we're thinking of this, the way we're going to lay this out here. So we have our $665,000 we need to get. We don't know what our commission is, and we don't know what the total is, or the sale price. What we're trying to find is this sale price here. Now, we don't know this, but we do know that this 7% commission is 7% of what? 7% of the sale price. 7% of the sale price. So the sale price is our 100%. Now this is the change in perspective I was telling you about, that you have to look at the question in this way so you could, and once you understand this, a lot of the questions that are even very similar to this, or any sort of math that's similar to this, where you have to kind of think in a reverse way, it makes a lot more sense. So again, our sale price is 100%. Our commission is 7%. What does that make everything else? Again, we can only add, we're adding up to 100% here, so that makes everything else 93%. You might see what we could do now. If not, stay with me. We'll get you there. So we have this 100%, and that's everything. We have the 7% commission, and then the 93% is everything else after our commission. Now, normally, and you just saw the math we did when we figured out commission, what you do is you take your sale price and you multiply it by the commission. So you do sale price times your commission. So whatever that came up, the 711,000 times the 7% as a decimal, and that's how we figured out what our commission is. But now let's say we want to backtrack. To backtrack here, we're going to be taking now this 93% and trying to get down to here. But normally when we're going this direction, we're multiplying, but we're not going that direction anymore. We're flipping it. So what we're doing here basically is we're flipping it and reversing it. We're flipping our direction and we're reversing our sign. It's a song about that. Check it out. It's not about math. Really, it won't teach you anything about math. But that's a good way to remember this. We're going to flip it and reverse it. So normally we multiply, but since we're reversing it, we're going to flip our sign. Instead of multiplying, we're actually going to divide. We're going to divide our $665,000 by 93%. Now, when you think about this, if you wanted to figure out that 93% from the sale price, you would take the sale price times 93%, you'd get $665,000. The beauty of math is that everything works in reverse as well. You just have to remember to flip your signs. So $665,000, when we then go and divide that by 93%, let's go and figure out this in our calculator right here, and we'll go and take out our question mark because we are about to have the answer. $665,000 divided by 0.93. Remember to change that to a decimal when you put that in your calculator, unless you know how to use the percentage button, either way. So now we have our correct sale price, $715,053 and about 76 cents when we round. So now you see what we truly need to sell our property for, $715,053.76. So if you were following along with the math we did before and we did it incorrectly, when we didn't come out with the right number, we only had $711, and that's about that extra $3,000 or so that we are leaving out here. So now when we take this $715,053.76, if we subtract out, and you could go ahead and double check this math, which I definitely recommend you always do if you want to be sure that your calculations are correct. If you multiply that by 7%, you'll get your commission. You subtract that out, you'll be back at $665,000. We'll have enough money to pay off the loan balance, we'll have enough money to pay the closing costs, and we'll have enough money to make our seller happy so they walk away with their $500,000 net. And again, if this were the principal residence, they'd be walking away from that without any sort of capital gains due. So this is seller's net. And it's a very common question. Like I said, again, with the course, it's very important that you do get a course that really shows you this information and really walks you through everything you need to know, because you're going to be using this information in the real world. This isn't just some sort of like benchmark to see how smart you are. No, this is teaching you the information that you're going to be utilizing for this new career. So information like this that's in here, and that's why we do these Ask the Instructor sessions, to really kind of help elaborate on this and really expand on this more. So a couple of the things I want to talk about with this, this sale price here that we came up with. Let's go ahead and figure out our commission that's in this. We're working a bunch of different math problems with this. That's why I love working with these sellers net type of problems, because there's just so much that you can kind of play with the numbers and so many different questions that you can get from this. So in order to figure out our commission, again, all we're doing for this is taking this $715,053.76 and multiplying it by 0.07. So we go ahead and put that in there, and now we have a $50,000 and 53.76 cents. So $50,000 paid, not too bad. Now, granted, this isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time to sell the property. Who knows? This property could even be on the market for 6 months to a year, but that $50,000 makes it worth its while. So, and $715,000, I know that seems like a large price value, but if you've been following the Tampa market at all, or really anything going on in Florida, because Florida is just exploding right now, it's ridiculous, especially the Tampa area, it's not uncommon to come across a property that's priced in the $715,000 price range. So that's our seller's net problem. Stay with us. My name is John Carissimo, and you're watching Ask the Instructor. After we come back from the break, we're going to go ahead and solve some more math problems, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment.
After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career. Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, and welcome back to Ask the Instructor. My name is John Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by Tampa School of Real Estate. It's put on for our students enrolled in not only our online courses, our classroom courses, our exam prep courses. We have every kind of course that you need for real estate. So check it out on the website, www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com. So our next question comes from Angela, and Angela is actually taking our online course out in New York, which, give me a moment here, how is that possible? How is she taking a Florida real estate license course in New York? So our online course, it's a revolutionary platform of interactive exercises, test and practice quizzes to make sure you understand the material, and it's really chunked out into a nice, interactive, engaging manner. So we just recently launched this new version of our online course, and we did that to further support our students, because not everybody that wants a Florida real estate license lives in Florida. And as a matter of fact, if you go look up the Florida statutes on this, you don't have to be a Florida resident to get a Florida real estate license. As a matter of fact, you don't even need U.S. citizenship. So that's right, you could actually be in another country, and believe me, we actually do have students taking our online course all over the world. As long as you have an internet connection, you're actually able to take this course, and the exam is completely online. Now, your state exam you will have to take in person, and you will have to be in the U.S. or on one of the military bases, but there's actually testing centers all over the country. So it's very easy to get your Florida real estate license, again, completely online with just that test that you'll take at one of the nationwide testing centers. And you'll have a Florida real estate license. Again, you don't need U.S. citizenship, and you do not need Florida residency. So give us a call if you want more information on that. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. We're here to help you out every step of the way, so give us a call. But now, back to our question here. So Angela in New York asked this question, and I'm glad that she asked this, because this kind of ties into that math that we were just doing with the seller's net. It's another way of kind of looking at this here. So a little bit more cumbersome, and this is something that's less likely to come up in the real world, but it is another thing that you do need to know, and it does. I say it's less likely to come up in the real world. It actually comes up in the real world every day, but it's usually not you doing the calculation for this. It's going to be usually the title company doing these calculations. But still good to understand this so you can describe this to your seller. Now, the scenario I'm going to give you here, this is another potential exam question. This is a little bit different way that this is presented. So it's on documentary stamp taxes. So documentary stamp taxes in particular on the deed to the property. So what a doc stamp is, a documentary stamp tax, this is a tax, and you can think of this figuratively, and there's not any actual stamps you're buying. It's not like going to the post office and you're buying little stamps. But if you want to think of it that way, then that makes more sense. You could think of it that way as well. Basically, what you're doing is buying one stamp for every $100 in property value. So let's go ahead and take our last property that we were dealing with, that seller's net question. Well, we came out to $715,000 that we needed. Let's say that we want to make our seller really happy, and we're trying to sell it for $720,000, and let's say we end up doing that. We get it under contract for $720,000. So this is our sale price. So $720,000 represents our sale price of the property. Now the question is asking, what are the doc stamps on the deed? So question wants to know, how much are the documentary stamp taxes on the deed? So now you have to do a little bit of remembering. Remember what the formula is for calculating documentary stamp taxes. It's going to be your price divided by 100 and then times 70 cents. And that equals our stamp tax. So our price divided by 100 times 70 cents, that gives us our stamp tax. So now, looking at this, if we can remember this formula here, really the rest of it is pretty easy because you see we're just going to plug in our price. But now let's talk a little bit about remembering this formula, because it's very important that you know we're dealing with price here, especially on your exam a lot of times, and in the real world you'll see this as well, but like I said, this is more something the title company typically has to solve. But on your exam you'll typically see it where it's giving you the price, but it also might tell you the loan amount. The loan amount does not matter for stamp tax on the deed. If we think of what the deed is the document that delivers ownership. So this is our paper that says this person is the new owner of the property, that the buyer is the owner of the property. That's our deed. And on that deed, it's going to say how they became the owner of the property, what type of consideration, what type of valuable consideration. You can see how I'm using all these terms here. So it is very important to really kind of master these terms. The more you understand these terms, the easier this information gets, the clearer everything gets. Again, there's so many layers of everything, and we're trying to break this down, make this as clear as possible. So we don't want our loan. The stamp tax on the deed is based on our valuable consideration. The valuable consideration is our purchase price. That's a fancy way of saying the purchase price of the property. So in this case, $720,000 is our valuable consideration in the deed. Short answer for this is the doc stamp tax on the deed is based on the price. Now that's a little bit harder to remember, and that's why I like to explain out why the doc stamp on the deed is based on price, and that's because it's based on the deed, the document that delivers the ownership, and it says it's delivering the ownership because this was exchanged for some valuable consideration in the amount of $720,000. So it's not based on our loan amount, despite what the question might lead you to believe. And very important that you remember, with these exam questions, you're not always going to use all the information that's in the question. A lot of times they put extra information in the question just to see if you really know what you're doing, to see if you could kind of, again, clear the path and find the information that you really truly need to know. And that's why I recommend on your scratch paper, whenever you're taking an exam, or any time that you're even doing this in the real world, say you could maybe go work at a title insurance company, or maybe your seller's asking you, because this is one of our closing costs. So going back to that seller's net thing, calculating out the closing cost, yeah, you could find calculators online for this as well, but I mean, you can whip out a piece of paper and figure this out as well if you know the math. So what we're going to be doing here is taking our price divided by 100, multiplying it by 70 cents, and that's going to give us our stamp tax. So we have our $720,000 purchase price divided by 100 and then multiplied by 70 cents. And you could punch this in your calculator all like this in one little repeating fashion. I mean, even if you got the world's cheapest calculator, you bought one of the dollar store special calculators, it's still going to be able to do this. Double check it though, make sure. But pretty much every calculator I've ever used has been able to do this. So what we're going to do now is just punch this in our calculator, $720,000 divided by 100. We get 7,200. Now I hit equal there. You don't have to do that. If you do want to do that, you're more than welcome to. So $7,200 times 70 cents, and we get our doc stamp on the deed of $5,040. So when the seller asks the question of, well, $15,000 in closing costs, what kind of closing costs are going to be? And wait a minute, that doesn't include your commission? This is something that you want to be able to explain because remember, the stamp tax on the deed is typically an expense of the seller. So out of that $15,000 that I came up with, $5,000 of that, and this is actually doing the calculation to be sure about that. So if you want to just kind of make up a number like that, don't do that. Actually use the calculators and find some information because again, our goal is to make the seller happy with that. So we're going to take this $5,040 here, and that's going to be part of our total closing cost. So that's one piece of information that you can form with them. Now, another way you might need to solve this out here is, let's say the question is asking now not what the doc stamp on the deed equals, but the question is asking what the price equals when the stamp tax on the deed, so very important that it's the stamp tax on the deed, equals $5,040. Now, since we just did the math here, we know that if the stamp tax was $5,040, our sale price would be $720,000. But let's say we didn't know this information up here. So let's say we didn't have any of that information, and it's asking us what's the price of the property if the stamp tax on the deed is $5,040. So we had our formula up here. This is our formula going in forward motion. So it's our price divided by 100 times 70 cents equals our stamp tax. And now this is how this question is very similar to the arithmetic that we did in the last question here. In that last question, we were actually going and reversing it. I told you about that concept of flip it and reverse it. No? Okay. So what we need to do is take this and reverse it. We're reversing our formula. We have the tax, we have the stamp tax on the deed, and we're trying to figure out the price. So we need to go from now, this is our point A and this is our point B. This is the reverse that we're working in. So again, we're reversing it, but in order to reverse it, we have to flip our signs. So what we're going to do here is take our stamp tax amount that was given to us. So remember, we don't have any of this information up here yet. We don't have any of that stuff. We don't know the sale price is $720,000. That's what we're trying to calculate. We're trying to take from the stamp tax on the deed and figure out our sale price. So what we need to do is take our price, our tax of $5,040. So we have our $5,040 tax. And now again, we're using the concept of flip it and reverse it. So we have divided by 100 times 70 cents when we're doing this in forward motion. Now again, we're reversing it. Instead of multiplying by 70 cents to get our tax, since we need to go in the reverse direction, instead of multiplying, we're going to divide. So remember, that's what we're doing. We're flipping it and reversing it. We're flipping our signs and we're reversing the direction. So $5,040, we're dividing that by 70 cents. And let's go ahead and keep going because again, we can put this in our calculator all in one little stroke here. So what we need to do is take our 5,040 divided by 70 cents and now multiply this. So again, we're flipping it and reversing. Instead of dividing, we're multiplying now by 100, and that's going to equal our price. Once we figure this all out, we will have the price. So let's go ahead and punch in the calculation here. We're going to do 5,040 divided by 0.7 times 100. And we get, there we go, everything checks out. Again, that's the beauty of math. Everything going forward works backwards, and we just proved through doing this type of math, we're able to get our $720,000. So by doing that, we could get our $720,000 in sale price. So two ways you can be looking at that for basically calculating out your stamp tax on the deed, or for if it's asking you to calculate the price based on the stamp tax on the deed. So we'll be right back after the short commercial break. My name is John Carissimo, and you're watching Ask the Instructor. When we come back, we'll go ahead and answer some more questions from some more of our students.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, and welcome back to Ask the Instructor. My name is John Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by Tampa School of Real Estate. Remember to check that out at www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. And real quick, just one more promo here. If you like the way we're laying out these math questions on the show and you want more of this, and this is just an hour-long show, so we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg here for this information. If you've already taken the course, which I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this show you have, we have all kinds of exam prep tools to help you get prepared for your Florida real estate exam. You have our weekend review courses to take, where it's a full day, Saturday and Sunday, going through information just like this. 16 hours, of course, 14 hours when you take out the time you got for lunch. You still get time to eat some food during this whole kind of cram session. But this is really great for getting yourself ready for not only the class exam, but the state exam as well. It's really going to help you master this material so you can perform greatly on the exam. We have a couple of those coming up in January, so go ahead and check the schedule on www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. We also have our exam prep question banks. I know this show has been really math heavy today. The math questions tends to be the ones where there's the most confusion, but again, understanding the key terms and really practicing with these questions, because the way they word these questions is a whole test in and of itself, being able to kind of, again, sift through the information. So check out our exam prep simulator. You can get that online. That's on demand. You can access that instantly. And if you haven't even taken the course yet, go ahead and log in and enroll. You can either enroll on our online course, get started right away, or check our schedule. We have classes starting all over the Tampa Bay area in numerous locations. You can check that out. So again, that's www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. And now our last math question that we're going to be doing today. It's again very similar to this last one. So our previous one that we were doing was the stamp tax on the deed. The next question now is going to be about stamp tax on the note. So stamp tax on the note is going to be different than our stamp tax on the deed. It's very similar in the way it's solved, and if you could do stamp tax on the deed, you could do stamp tax on the note. The math really doesn't change. The formula doesn't really change at all, except for one little aspect of that. So if you remember our stamp tax on the note formula, we're starting now with the loan amount. So that's one of the key things with the stamp tax on the note. It's based on the loan amount divided by 100. So the same there. But then we change one more thing as well. It's not 70 cents, it's 35 cents. Now, a little bit of a correlation there to help you remember this is 35 cents is half of 70 cents. I don't know if that's coincidence or if that's on purpose, but either way, it's a really easy way to remember our stamp tax on the deed is 70 cents, our stamp tax on the note is 35 cents. And that's going to equal our stamp tax on the note. Now, the key thing with this is it's based on the loan amount. So just like our stamp tax on the deed that we just did, that was based on the purchase price, our stamp tax on the loan, or on the note, I should say, is based on the loan amount. And I'll go ahead and fill you in on how you can remember that. This is the stamp tax on the note. Our last one was the stamp tax on the deed. Remember, the stamp tax on the deed is a tax on the deed. The deed has the purchase price in it. That's what you want to remember. Our stamp tax on the note has our loan amount in the note. If you think of what the note is, the promissory note, this is essentially like the contract that you sign when you're taking out a mortgage. So you go to take out a mortgage, you sign this promissory note where you're promising to repay this debt that's listed on here. And what number is going to be listed on that? A lot of numbers, but one of the key ones, the biggest one, is going to be the loan amount. Or the interest that you're having to pay over the life of the loan, if they include that in there. But usually you have to do the math yourself to figure that out, which we'll do another show where we actually do the amortization and calculating interest and all kinds of stuff like that, working with interest. So if you like this show, remember to like and subscribe, leave your comments, share it to your friends. That shows us that you guys do enjoy the show. You want us to keep doing these. We'll keep doing these as long as you guys keep liking and enjoying them. So back to our math question here. We have our loan amount. We're going to divide that by 100. We're going to multiply it by 35 cents, and that's going to give us our stamp tax on the note. So now let's say we have the question where we have a $100,000 loan. And now we want to figure out the tax, stamp tax on the note. So we have a $100,000 loan, and we want to figure out our stamp tax on the note. In order to do this, we're just going to plug in our information in the problem. So it's overall pretty simple. The key thing is, remember, not only that it's 35 cents, but this is what I see most people mess up often, is that it's the loan that it's based on, not the purchase price that it's based on. So you take your $100,000 loan, we're going to divide that by 100 and multiply it by 35 cents. So let's go ahead and put that down here, $100,000. That's our loan amount. That's how much we took out the loan for, not the purchase price. Again, separate things, very separate, different things. If you need more help understanding that, definitely check out our review courses or a pre-licensing course if you haven't taken the course yet. But the loan amount and purchase price is definitely different. So we have our $100,000 loan. We're going to divide that by 100, and we're going to multiply that by 35 cents. And that's going to give us our stamp tax on the note. So let's go ahead and plug in these calculations here real quick. We have a $100,000 loan divided by $100 times 35 cents, and we get $350. So $350 is our stamp tax on the note. That's what this is right up here, our stamp tax on the note. Now, is this a buyer's expense or a seller's expense? And the real answer is it depends, because sometimes this is an expense of the buyer, sometimes it's an expense of the seller, but most of the time this is going to be the buyer's expense. Why is it the buyer's expense? Let's talk about that, because this is a good important concept to know. This is typically the buyer's expense because whose loan are we talking about here? This is a fee, a tax that's charged for creating a loan, or really for any sort of loan whenever a loan is transacted, because we're going to use this even if the loan is assumed. We're using this for new and old loans that we have to charge the stamp tax on the note. So this is always charged on loans. So it's a tax that the state of Florida incurs every time there's some sort of loan that occurs. There's some sort of loan that needs to be recorded. That's where they charge this $350 stamp tax. And now this is typically an expense of the buyer because this is the buyer's loan that they are taking out. So we have that $350 that the buyer would typically have to pay. And this is good information to know. Again, just like informing your seller that they're going to have to pay $5,000 in stamp taxes on the deed, informing your buyer like, hey, look, the seller's going to pay for my commission, and this is true most of the time. The seller is usually responsible for paying the commission, unless you have some sort of buyer brokerage agreement signed with your buyer. That's going to be where you're relying on the seller and what's in the listing agreement, whether it's your listing or a cooperating broker's listing. You're relying on that information in that listing agreement, and that there being a commission that's in there, and that's where the seller would have to pay not only the seller's agent commission but also the buyer's agent's commission. But you want to. Very important that you point out to your buyers that they won't have to pay you. There's not going to be any fee unless you're charging them some retainer fee or anything, which you could definitely get into the buyer brokerage agreement. We'll talk about that on another show. They won't have to pay you, but they will have to pay a stamp tax on the note if they're doing any sort of financing. So being able to do the calculations and working with a good mortgage loan originator will also help your clients out with this as well. So if you don't understand this quite as well and you're not able to speak to it, number one, I would say get confident with it because it's a pretty easy topic to master. But secondhand, just again, with like we talked about with taxes earlier, you want to have a professional in that arena, and you want to have a professional mortgage loan originator that you could go to with questions. So when they have these loan questions for you, if you can't answer these questions fully, you have a loan originator that you work with that can help answer them and meet their needs. So now, our last little thing we're going to do here is just like we did on the stamp tax on the deed problem. Let's say the question now is not asking what the stamp tax amount is, it's asking what the loan is. So now the question is asking what the loan is if we have $350 in stamp taxes on the note. Very important now that we're dealing with the stamp tax on the note, because if we're dealing with stamp tax on the deed, that's going to lead back to our purchase price. This one's going to lead back to our loan amount. So just like we did before, where we're going to flip it and reverse it. So we already know it's a $100,000 loan, but again, we're saying we don't know this information. We don't know that $100,000, and we want to work our way back to it. So again, we're going to go ahead and flip it and reverse it. We're reversing our direction. We're going to go from our $350 tax, And now, again, instead of multiplying, we're going to divide by 35 cents. And here, instead of dividing, we're going to multiply by 100. And we do that. Let's punch this in our calculator. We already know the answer is 100,000, but let's go ahead and double check, make sure our math is all working out. So let's punch this in here. 350 divided by 35 cents times 100. And we get $100,000. So that's our $100,000 we have for our stamp tax, our loan amount. The stamp tax on the note was $350. Our loan amount was $100,000. You've now seen both ways to go at this, whether you're trying to figure out the note, the tax, or you're trying to figure out the loan amount itself. So that's all the time we have for today. If you like the show, again, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We do these shows every Wednesday at noon, so make sure you tune in. We're going to be asking a whole different set of questions, answering a whole different set of questions next Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time. Again, my name is John Carissimo. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. That's www.tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Thanks for tuning in today, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching.